kids, where are you? It's time for all the art to tell stories.
Autumn had arrived, and the leaves in the forest were gradually turning yellow, while a cool breeze gently brushed each tree. It was the busiest time of the year as all the animals were preparing for the coming winter. Especially Mimi, the little squirrel, knew that food would become scarce in winter, and she had to store enough nuts during autumn to survive the long cold winter. Mimi was a diligent little squirrel. She lived deep in the forest in a tall oak tree. Her nest was already lined with soft leaves and dry grass, but her food storage room was almost empty. Mimi knew acorns were her main source of food for winter, so every year around this time, she would search everywhere for acorns, pine cones, and other nuts, carefully hiding them one by one in her den. One morning, Mimi woke up early, looked at the oak tree full of acorns, and felt a burst of joy. This year's harvest looks good. I should be able to store enough food. She quickly jumped down from the tree and began busily searching the ground for ripe fallen acorns. As Mimi hopped around the forest, her bag quickly filled with acorns. Just as she was about to go home, she heard a rustling sound coming from the bushes. It was her good friend, Little White Rabbit, who was carrying a big bunch of carrots, also preparing for winter. "Good morning, Little White. Are you storing food for winter too?" Mimi greeted. Little White smiled and said, "Yes, it's hard to find carrots in winter, so I need to prepare more while it's autumn." Mimi nodded. "Exactly. I'm also collecting acorns. This year's harvest is great, so I need to store the food quickly." "Do you need help?" Little White shook her head. "No, thank you, Mimi. But I heard that the pine cones near the big tree are also plentiful this year. You should check it out." Mimi was delighted and said goodbye to Little White, quickly running towards the big tree. She thought, if I can find some pine cones, my food storage will be even more abundant. When Mimi arrived under the big tree, she indeed found the ground covered with fallen pine cones. She happily picked them up one by one until her bag could hold no more. Just as she was about to go home, the sky suddenly turned dark and the wind began to blow fiercely. Mimi thought, "Oh no, it's going to rain." Sure enough, soon large raindrops began to fall. Carrying her heavy bag, Mimi struggled to run home. But the rain became heavier and the ground slippery, making her steps slower. Then, Mimi saw a little mole struggling in the rain. The mole's hole was flooded and he couldn't go home, frantically searching for shelter in the mud. Mimi's heart tightened. Though she was eager to go home, she ran over to help the little mole. She used her body to shield the mole from some of the rain and guided him to a safe place under a big tree to take shelter. The little mole gratefully said, "Thank you, Mimi. If it weren't for you, I might have been trapped in the flood." Mimi smiled and said, "You're welcome. We should all help each other." They waited under the tree until the rain eased. Then Mimi said goodbye to the mole and continued home. When Mimi finally got home, her bag was filled with acorns and pine cones. Despite the rain, she still felt it was a bountiful day.